It's 2:30 on a Thursday. You know what that means. It is time for Sikich Live. I'll be your host today, Ryan Olson. Michael DeGeeter will be joining us again next week. And today we are actually going to be talking about private equity, ERP projects, and typically how Sikich can help these types of companies kind of manage some risk and perform these implementations a little smoother, a little faster, and with repeatable outcomes. And to do that, I have two guests to help us out. First, we have Carla Miller. We also have Robert Sawyer. Welcome to Sikich Live. We're talking about private equity, and I think we're going to have a great discussion today.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I think time is of the essence, especially in private equity. So let's jump right into it. How does Sikich help with private equity firms?
I can get us started. We definitely work with private equity firms often, and we have different services, different ways that we help them. I'll talk about a couple. I know one of our goals and what we see a lot of private equities require is the need for some level of standardization as it makes sense for the different portfolio companies. So we tend to work with them to create a repeatable process. We've developed Head Start, which has different industry focuses that allows for a quicker, faster implementation. That's one way. I know Robert has done a ton with these types of companies and has further thoughts on some of the work he's done as well.
Yes. So to complement what Carla has already mentioned, I think what's extremely important is our startup to having a conversation, already understanding usually what the premise is, whether or not it's through acquisition, a divestiture, what size portfolio company, what size private equity firm. We've worked with publicly traded all the way to privately held. More recently, we've worked with mid-market in a specific area of manufacturing, consumer packaged goods. So we can work with PE firms on asset and software purchasing, providing advisory on structuring their IT department, basically, what's the right level of staffing. We can do pro forma, if you will, expense statements on what that organizational structure is. We give them the option if they want to do some type of hybrid outsourcing or complete outsourcing. We've worked with private equity firms there. TSA discovery, reviews, and advisory, and then also building out the strategic roadmaps because it's not only depending on, again, if it's on the acquisitive side or divestiture. Most people want to understand not only what the initial CapEx costs are going to be, but the OpEx over a period of usually at least 3 years and 1 day.
Right. And you mentioned something in there, companies with different portfolios. This kind of leads into our next question about what type of private equity firms do you guys usually work with? Is a kind of a portfolio of companies important or maybe expand on kind of the target private equity firm?
Yeah, I think, when I think about that, to me, there's definitely a clear distinction between services that a private equity at the parent level requires versus private equity services that are geared towards the portfolio companies, right? And we certainly do both. And the portfolio companies, the needs for private equity at a corporate level, right, tend to be more financial driven, right? With some exceptions, but overall they tend to be more financial driven. And we certainly help with whether that's ERP implementation, as well as some of the other services that Robert mentioned earlier, whether that's, TSAs and other such things. However, for the portfolio companies, industry starts to become incredibly important, whether that is distribution or manufacturing, two of our key industries, and the head starts that we've developed and creating, again, that level of standardization in ERP and CRM deployments is a standard approach that we have to these kinds of projects. Love to hear Robert expand on that as well.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to the very large private equity firms, they may not necessarily have a specific focus, meaning it may be depending on, the asset purchase is what's going to drive the conversation. So it could be a smattering of all types of industries. We've worked with very specific private equity firms where it's from former owner operators and it's more mid-market. And so they start, as an example, targeting certain level size manufacturing companies, consumer packaged goods, focus on distribution because they want to stay within their niche, their center of excellence, if you will. So we're here to support either way. We're flexible. I think what is extremely valuable not to private equity companies as a whole is our access to resources, the team that we have that can deploy as needed, and that we are not just necessarily solely focused as if we're only talking about software and our box is extremely small, or our focus is so small that we can't step beyond what I would say some people might refer to as our comfort zone. We want to be, I would say, the one-stop shop complete advisory services for all of our clients, but it works very well with private equity firms, so we can show depth and range.
And we do offer so many different services, and it does kind of cross a whole spectrum of things. But you guys are talking with these companies, very frequently. And what are some of the things that you feel like are some areas of kind of core expertise that private equity firms are looking for and that we can bring to that table?
Yeah, I mean, I can name a couple, and Robert, you can name a few too. I mean, for me, I tend to work with a lot of private equity companies that are looking for ERP, whether it's for themselves or, again, that search for a standard for their portfolio companies, as well as discussion of CRM, things like their cloud strategy in general, cloud readiness, what their overall strategy is for cloud, discussions around, making the workplace, especially in the COVID area or the COVID age, making the workforce play more of a remote ready workplace. So all those types of discussions are where I, definitely have seen and have had a lot of conversations around with private equity companies.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, I would say private equity firms typically aren't technologists just by nature of their trade. So, yes, ERP is, I would consider, the hub. And there's a lot of spokes, depending on, for an example, more recently with the divestiture, when there was a centralized back office and everything, accounting, IT support, asset management, all the way down to the shop floor was all centralized, which is good when it comes to kind of overall corporate efficiency. But when it comes to divestiture, that means they don't have any of that layer locally. So we worked with very recently on a project. Matter of fact, that's why I'm at the airport now, all the way down to setting up audio visual. If we don't do it within our ERP team, we know somebody that does. And so our network, if you will, of just even internally here at Sikich, from routers to cybersecurity to vulnerability scans to basically making sure, especially nowadays with the cyber attacks that are going on, giving them this complete risk managed portfolio. So of all things that they have clarity in, especially after they've gone through, and we can assist on Q of E on the accounting side. We have a group that does transactional advisory services, but they just want to be able to go to one centralized point of contact, not have 20 people they have to deal with, and feel like they have a partner that's going to work with them to deliver everything that they need to basically stand up sometimes a company, at least all the supporting infrastructure from scratch. And we definitely have the depth and experience to go from 0 to 100 in a couple of minutes. It's just been one of our strong suits.
And Robert, I know we even at some point were, because Sikich has the agency, right? We even were assisting with things like, it was an acquisition of a new portfolio company, and we even assisted with some degree of I guess it was website, right? It was
website design, LinkedIn job publishing. It's sometimes it's providing a bridge to stability, because when you're talking about standing up a company that has not had, or that did not have that localized type of infrastructure, everybody has to be hired. Well, in this in this environment, labor challenges are extremely, we'll just say they're difficult. So, but they have to continue to operate their business. And, we're there we can do complete outsourcing to provide flexibility, to provide a bridge. Like I said, HR advisory. We did everything from helping co-design and support their website initially until they brought their own folks in. And sometimes it's a booster, sometimes it's complete outsourcing, and a lot of people like to have their options. So we've been fortunate enough to be the one-stop shop portfolio support.
There was one common theme as you both were talking about this, and that is the theme of risk. And I'm assuming in private equity, being able to control what risk you can is vitally important. And I think an ERP system is kind of the heart of things. I think, Robert, you mentioned it was the hub. So what is something that a private equity firm can do to lower their risk of an implementation of an ERP system?
Yeah, so one of the things I would say that private equity firms are known for is efficiencies, driving efficiencies, reducing SKUs, keeping the proper size headcount, making sure that work stream business processes are defined. And so same thing for us. We operate from the same model and viewpoint that with Head Start, which is basically our pre-configured database that has not only tools, templates, it allows us to gain time in what would typically be a longer time project, and time equals more money because it requires a longer and larger footprint to implement. We can quickly demonstrate what that means in terms of earned value. And for private equity firms, when it comes to typically what they've signed, which is a transitional services agreement, a TSA, they're paying monthly services to the company that they've basically acquired, that divestiture, that portfolio company. So if we can help them shorten that TSA by providing our services, getting them live, getting their infrastructure in place, then that can be realized, I would say, or minimized expense right from the beginning. But because we have, again, rapid deployment prototypes and protocols, because we have our own intellectual property and head start on how we operate all of our teams in implementing ERP, CE, we have standardized processes, and these are based off of industry best practices, then it basically demonstrates firsthand, not just through lip service, that we can deliver minimize risk, the most strategic investment. And this allows, again, the private equity firm to focus on the operations and get through the IT transition, if you will. And then, as they continue to grow their team, or if they look at either bolt-on acquisitions to further drive value on that portfolio company, we help set that up to a point where it's feasible. They can lead it. We can provide augmented services there, or we can go through the whole process and own it. Either way, the point is we have the depth, the breadth, and the expertise to guide in a whole range and host of flexibility.
Great.
I was just going to add that, everything that Robert said to me, I hear it, and it comes down to obviously risk management. But from my standpoint, working so much within the ERP and CRM realm, I focus on, especially if there is a specific industry that a private equity firm tends to focus on, is trying to leverage our Head Start and create repeatable process that equal risk reduction. That is one of the key, discussion points that I focus with my customers, my private equity clients.
One more thing I would say, and what that does in reducing risk, it provides some boosting guardrails, and I would say scaffolding. So as people are brought on board, there's already a structure in place, and the less time they have to kind of learn the nuances, the more they get to get in depth with the application, or sometimes even directly participate with us on the conversion and implementation process. The getting the portfolio company up to speed, it provides a fertile training ground for those new employees, which it would be difficult to synthetically create that in any other way. So it's just another training opportunity on how they can be operationally independent, and we can train them up through the whole implementation process, which further reduces risk, as Carla was referencing.
Fantastic. So, it's clear both of you, know the private equity industry extremely well. As you talk with clients, as you talk with prospects or people kind of just in the discovery phases of what's possible, what are some of the key insights that you've kind of pulled from those conversations, pulled from those discussions, pulled from experience, that you feel other private equity firms watching this could benefit from? And Carla, we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is definitely understanding their strategy. It all starts there. Private equity companies operate in a way differently than a lot of businesses. They may have different goals, they may have different objectives, and that is very different from company to company. So the first thing I like to focus on is really understanding what is their ultimate goal at a short-term level as well as long-term, because that guides us on how to be consultative with them to help them achieve that goal. I know that goes without saying. We probably do this with just about every project that we do anyway, and have these discussions with every company. That said, I think with private equity, really understanding how tied those goals and objectives are to how they view success is extremely important. And I've seen Robert do this wonderfully many times. So.
And Robert, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was hoping the flight announcement would have been done by now. So everybody, again, it's fitting that I'm just coming from a private equity project, which is why I'm in a flight line lounge. But so I think very quickly, I mean, again, one of our most recent relationships was based on a phone call and just initial discovery. And one thing that I've seen, all the companies that we work with are extremely sharp. But what I do know with private equity is that they're not into a very long discovery cycle of who they're going to work with. They want to get straight to brass tacks as quickly as possible. And you have to pass the smell test within 10 minutes because they just don't. I don't know that they're not interested, but they don't have a lot of time for marketing and puffery. They just want to get straight to what can you do? Tell me about your experience. And then what they want to be able to do in working with any partner that they choose is actually learn some of the process. They're not going to turn into software implementers, but they want to be as educated at the table and not completely relying. And this comes back to risk management. So because we understand after we go through, like Carla mentioned, what their portfolio strategy is, we can provide very custom tailored specific recommendation and advice, because we're not going to go down the path of the art of the possible and 10-year plan and 5-year plan, because sometimes it's not a worthy discussion, because generally speaking, portfolio companies are going to be held for 3 years and 1 day unless tax laws change. So when we're talking about growth strategy, we can talk about how we can help them realize the maximum amount of value in any of their infrastructure, software, or services cost with any kind of extended services with us to provide training and support. And again, what we've seen before, they love to pick our brains. That's like Carla was mentioning, the consultative part. What have you seen before? Tell us about the blind spots. What have other similar firms done in this particular type of strategy? And it's all data and decision points, which helps them deliver, specific answers to their investors. We've been on the phone with investment banks as they're going through even the confidential informational packet, the CIP, before the acquisition, where they're representing sometimes with an equal chair with the private equity firm, helping them that maybe they would have to hire a complete staff to have the same level of of value on their team, and depending on the size of private equity firm, it may not make a lot of financial sense to carry such a level of overhead consistently on your staff. So we're there to size up and be available for, like I said, any level of discussion. And because we can go from basically 0 to 100 and get ready to engage rather quickly, I think that appeal is extremely appealing. The flexibility is extremely appealing to private equity firms.
Fantastic. So I think to wrap this all up, we've talked a lot about hypotheticals. Recently on Sikich.com, we've posted a case study about a private equity client and kind of the process that they went through. And if my internet doesn't choke, I'll try to add it here to the stream. And after this broadcast, I will be posting this on LinkedIn, so anybody watching can go and view this right after we're done here. What are some good takeaways for private equity companies if they want to dig into this? What are some things that we can pull out and kind of highlight the tangible benefits that we've brought them?
I would say the quicker that we can provide, as it was referencing, operational standards, and it gives them options to make decisions from. Everybody's time is extremely valuable, but a lot of times, depending on, say, for example, a managing partner, managing director, they may have 3, 5, 6 different portfolio companies they're responsible for. They have extremely limited time, even in the acquisition process they just want to get to tell us what our options are. What would you recommend and why? Give me some history about why you've recommended this before. How has it worked out? And so again, it's getting to an operational standard, advising them with our recommendations based on our history and experience. And it just, again, sorts through all of the ambiguity that could happen as you're going through this process and delivering almost decisions on a one-pager. Here's what's in front of us. Here's our focus. Here's the next 2 weeks. This is what we can do. This is what we'd advise against. This is the reason why we're giving you this specific recommendation. What would you like to do? And we can get started tomorrow.
Great.
Well said. Yes, I agree. Time to value, speed, financial decisions, quick financial decisions, evaluating financially, long-term, short-term, all of these sort of ideas or concepts are key in these discussions. That's what I've observed as well.
Okay, so I think that kind of brings us to our time here. Robert, we want to make sure you get on the airplane there, so we'll call time. And thank you both so much for joining us today. And like I said, again, at the kind of end of the last question there, I will be posting that article about private equity firms on LinkedIn. So if you're watching this from other places, be sure to head to the Sikich LinkedIn page where you will find that article. You can kind of get some more details about all of the private equity work that we've done for this company and kind of some of the results that happened. So thank you all for joining us for Sikich Live. Number 51 next week will be number 52, which will be a solid week or a solid year of weekly Sikich Live content. So that'll be an exciting one. And thank you all for joining, and we will see you again next week.